Chicago was the setting for yet another example of the type of domestic terrorism that hard-left agitators created in their attempt to bend public opinion and government to their whims. We'll discuss why this is coming to your town in this episode of Activate America, Getting Active to Throw Off Government Tyranny. When folks hear the term domestic terrorism, many hearken back to the Oklahoma City bombing as a prime example, as well as the antics of the Unabomber. Still, others point to what federal agents did at Ruby Ridge and Waco as fitting examples. The FBI defines domestic terrorism as violent criminal acts committed by individuals and/or groups to further ideological goals stemming from domestic influences such as those of a political, religious, social, racial, or environmental nature. According to this definition, Black Lives Matter fits right in. The self-proclaimed peaceful protests are nothing more than a match lighting a fuse. The protest and subsequent riots have produced violent criminal acts relating to social, racial, and political issues. This is exactly what the Marxists, Maoists, and Communists organizing these widespread events really want. In a prior video, we highlighted a map of nearly 4,400 protest sites that have occurred around the world, with the bulk of them in the US and Europe. In looking at the map, one can draw the conclusion that organizers are ensuring that protests are showing up in your area to bring the issue directly to you. Intimidation may be a good word for it, but what it does do is create the appearance of popular support. When looking at the riots and mass crowds, you are led to believe it has more support than it actually does. For instance, how many protesters at these events are actually from that area? Two examples that may shed some light on this include a recent incident of a BLM protest in the sleepy rural town of Waupaca, Wisconsin, population 6,000, which is about an hour away from the Appleton headquarters. News reports indicate that a 24-year-old resident from Neenah attended the event, which is about 40 miles away from Waupaca. He showed up with a loaded rifle and a backpack with about 100 rounds of ammunition in it. He and others illegally blocked a public roadway, impeding traffic, and failed to comply with officers' warnings. As he was being taken into custody, according to police and media reports, he raised his rifle at an officer who quickly threw him to the ground. He is very lucky, as he could have been legally shot. Court records indicate he now faces 3 felonies and 2 misdemeanors, and he is a Caucasian. News reports also indicate that other attendees came from Appleton. Well, how many of these protesters were actually from the local area was not revealed. The second example just took place in a neighborhood of Chicago. In response to a shooting that took place over the weekend, activists organized a protest in Englewood. To the surprise of the protesters, they were met with residents of Englewood letting them know that they weren't welcomed. While the Chicago Tribune called this a rare public sign of discord, the reality is that these protests are largely organized by outsiders for the purpose of creating discord and distrust among residents and police to further a much larger agenda of moving us into anarchy. As Mr. Art Thompson has pointed out in some of his recent videos, he was directly involved with other members of the John Birch Society in exposing this very tactic of outside agitation to the inner city residents of a few major cities in the 1960s when race riots were common. He helped to organize Support Your Local Police Committees in which members and non-members of the local community went door to door to inform residents of what they could expect. The race riots followed a typical plan of bringing in a nationally known black speaker, holding a protest march, and then sparking a riot. Residents were told that many out-of-towners would come in with the intent to cause property destruction. It was suggested that residents stay home and to be prepared to protect their family and property. On more than one occasion, while other major cities across the U.S. were burning, the efforts of the Support Your Local Police Committees helped to derail planned riots. In fact, in the 1960s, the John Birch Society sponsored many brave black members, some of whom were ex-communists, to expose the civil rights movement for what it really was. A video the organization put together in 1965 did a great job exposing this. It was called Anarchy USA. This powerful tool featured Leonard Patterson, who was on the National Executive Committee of the American Young Communist League and was trained along with other high-ranking communists in Lenin University in Moscow. It also featured ex-Communist Party member Julia Brown, who infiltrated the Communist Party as an FBI agent. Mrs. Brown mentions in the video, "The aspirations of black Americans for full equality were not created by communists, but they were used by communists in such a way that idealistic Americans of all races can be tricked into implementing the communist movement for revolution. Having been on the inside of the Communist Party," she says, "it's easy for me to recognize this revolutionary agitation in disguise. But the average American finds it hard to believe that something as worthy and noble sounding as a civil rights movement could possibly be a communist maneuver." Well, back then, the communists were not as bold as they are now and worked to keep their involvement under wraps. Today, leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement are proudly declaring that they are Marxist trained. This is domestic terrorism uncovered as a communist revolution. And today, this revolution is built upon the foundation of COVID-19 tyranny. It's a perfect storm out there for these Marxist activists that are finding fertile ground to sow seeds of discord, discontent, and distrust between the police and the local community. The tried and true tactic of educating the people is the only long-term solution of stopping the effects of this revolution on not just the federal government, but mostly upon the local and state governments that are quick to act in defending the criminals instead of their police officers. We are seeing many JBS members distributing the "What's Really Behind the Riots" special report from the New American. Support Your Local Police Committees are also mailing them out to those officials who are directly responsible in overseeing the police, including members of the City Council, supervisors, police chiefs, and police unions. Committees are also sending these out to churches and local media. If you haven't formed a local committee, pulling one together is highly encouraged. Then please set out to send targeted mailings of these reports as well as to share online Anarchy USA. Follow up with interested individuals and ask them to join. With your help, we can expose this movement and stop the revolution at the local level. Links are in the video description. And until next time, this is Bill Hahn for the John Birch Society saying stay active, everyone.